For this podcast, we're going to be going over stating the case for, regardless of political ideology, but rather for the best case for people to have the best mental health is for the maintaining the smallest government possible. And before we get to that, we're going to be asking people to please donate to my Patreon page, because I'm not at the amount to get advertisement. That's www.patreon.com/challengehistory. When I hit my threshold at the it goes at $1 for the base level, the $10 level, 25, and then a $50 and $100 level. At the $50 and $100 levels, when you hit when I hit thresholds on those, at the $50 level, there's going to be Roman Empire silver coin giveaway, and at the $100 level, a Byzantine Empire gold coin giveaway for one person, and that's when I reach at least like 5 people at each level. On the page, when you go to it, you'll see basic explanation saying that I am on disability and a little bit of my story, and then you'll see an introduction on there. The money's going to go towards obviously personal cost and equipment for the podcast as well. Everything from audio equipment to video equipment to even computers and such, when needed, as well as purchasing the giveaway items. In addition, obviously, to the other stuff I talked about, and then obviously paying for medical costs as well. But beyond that, we'll get to the point with it. First, if you go here with it, we'll give an idea of it. Is basically, we look at the idea of small government is the purpose with it. We go to Money Crashers. It's saying to get government off your backs, which is the whole idea of getting government out of the way. Which would actually, if we're talking about that from the aspect of any person, should actually be the purpose. And if we look at the what it actually views from the actual positions, let's where do I find that? Yeah, let's see where I found that. I'm looking for where I found it. It was a percentage that showed people that found that the government was overbearing. Once I get to that. Right here. It says 62% of Americans believe that the federal government controls too much of their lives, according to 2012 Pew Research, which would mean that basically that, and I believe that that would have, especially when we got into this level, that we've been in a point where it's further down the road where we've gotten a lot more polarized. I think that we can declare that it's gotten even worse, and then we can see that that we've gotten to a point where we're subsidizing things at a massive rate. And these are basically where the government hands out tax dollars to different groups, and what we need to understand is the result is we're actually paying more money for goods because they want to essentially say, oh, but other countries are doing it. Now what this actually causes is the actual goods that we're paying for actually become much more expensive. This is in the goods for farm subsidies. We're paying more in oil subsidies as well, which means that we're basically paying more for oil as well. Ethanol subsidies, which is really kind of an extension off of the farm subsidies, which means you're paying more for fuel as well. Export subsidies, WTO bans it with it. It allows it the federal government to do it for farmers to compete with other countries' subsidized exports. And that means that what we're doing is when we do that raises prices for our actual items as well, which means they're actually doubling down on that housing subsidies, which means it's raising the price for people actually to actually own homes, which is why what we're noticing now is that a lot of the with them doing that, we're noticing that what the actual cause of that is that people now there's a small amount of people having homes. Other subsidies that they've done is cash for clunkers in the past. The ACA subsidies, which now is, as you see, healthcare costs are astronomical. And subsidies are not exactly what we consider as a good thing, because you're paying, you can say, for one group says, oh, we're not paying for it. Well, actually you are, because you're paying for it in tax dollars, and actually because it's being subsidized, it's actually becoming an actual cost. Now, some other things that are actually becoming major costs is when we have government contractors. Now, some of the biggest are through NASA and defense. Defense specifically, let's look at this is in millions, so it would actually be in going into the billions for the amounts with it. Lockheed Martin is basically they're the largest, and then it goes to Boeing, Raytheon, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, McKesson Group, Huntington Ingalls Industries, BAE Systems, Leidos Holdings, Honeywell, United Technologies, L3 Technologies, Humana, Booz Allen Hamilton, AECOM Technologies, Bechtel Group, and so on down the line. Within, you're going to see there's a list of a lot of companies on it. And you will see a huge amount of technology of companies within the this is just through the government technologies. This is from fiscal year 2018, and that's another thing that we're actually paying for, and that costs a lot of other money. Now, when we start to look at the government expenditures, you will see on what costs a lot of money. Social Security costs us over $1 trillion in budget. Medicare costs us over $651.2 billion in budget. Medicaid. Now, this is essentially from people who do not work. There are some people who are on disability, but the majority are people who just do not work. $418.7 billion. Other welfare programs for family and children, other welfare programs total $384.5 billion, but it also gets some money from the state and local, which totals $482.2 billion. And because they're doing, it's getting crossover money from other agencies. Family and children is getting 298.1, but it's getting some crossover money, which lowers it down to 129.3, but it also but it gets raised up because it also has, I guess, 129.3 from local, and which totals its amount to 315.7 on its budget. Unemployment 29.1, but it gets 6.6 for the crossover from other agencies, so it's at 40, and it gets another 41.6 from state and local, so it's at 64.2. Housing 51.4, it gets 7.4 from other crossover from agencies. 52.4 there from state and local, so it's at 96.4. So these are a lot of these things that are getting from other agencies. Government pensions 58.3 plus state and local 331.5 for 389.8. You look at defense. It's 939.4, gets 1.6 from local for 941. Military defense is 684.6, that's what it's sitting at. The civil defense is nothing. Veterans get 200.5. It gets 1.6 from local for 202.1. Foreign military aid 13.1 billion. That's another 13.1 billion there that's wasted. Foreign economic aid 41.2 billion. These are what it called. This is a lot of money that goes right out the door, and that's basically out of your pocket. And it's a lot, and it could either A, be chewed up in loans, or B, chewed up in taxation, depending on how it's viewed. And other spending, medical service 138.8. Public health services 4.9. That's another thing. R&D health. This is something that should be completely private, 38.6. Pre-primary through post-secondary education, 45.3, and another 676.3 billion local for 721.6. And if you start looking at it, you're going to see how much money is actually spent. And you're going to see that it's a lot of money. That the local should be the one that's actually footing the bill, and you're going to notice how much money is actually kind of wasted through the actual budget. You'll keep going down the list. Economic Affairs NEC 28.6. That's wasted money. Protection of biodiversity and landscape, that should be a local issue only. Housing development should have no money in that. That should be a local issue. Community development, that's another thing. That's 33 billion. That should have nothing. Water supply should not even be on there. Recreational sports and recreational and sporting services, that shouldn't even be on there. That's completely useless. General public services, another 8.9 billion. And you'll see, you keep going down the list. And as you start to realize, This is why when we start to look at it, is the public debt is over $22 trillion, because there's a lot of things that the government is not actually functionable. And when you start to say, well, why is the government working in on that aspect of my lives and trying to control that aspect of my lives? And then we start to see with it that they're trying to say that, oh, we basically are doing this because there's all this because we're having all this funding with it, and then we can basically control all of this, all these aspects of your lives because the government's this large. And when even though they they state on this that Republicans, well, and they make mention of Mitt Romney. Well, Mitt Romney, we know what he stood for, that he was just as much for expanding the government on the defense side, and we know about Romney Care. The Romney Care was just a predecessor of Obamacare, and that's all it was. And so there was no difference, because this goes back to the idea of the Romney-Obama election. And we know that he was no different. And they make the idea on TED, how TED goes with it on the which is a conference, community of people dedicated to ideas worth spreading, and they bring some ideas with, like, modernize the Constitution. You don't need to modernize the Constitution. The Constitution is fine. What you need to do is actually what we've seen the major points, which is actually some of the positive things, which is the majority of people find that the government's too intrusive. This means that basically, and this was something that was actually noted by our founders. They knew the government. They knew if the government did not follow the Constitution, they would be too intrusive. And there is no setup for what when people talk about, they make mention of population density and things like that. That's basically, it doesn't matter with those certain things. Because the fact is when you see those areas that are more dense in population, those are more apt to be people that are going to be more impacted by some of the mental problems caused by big government, and some of the massive causes by big government, and they keep voting for it anyway. And this is something that needs to be understood. So making the case that there's complex issues with that is not a legitimate argument. And they say a constitution should be written every 20 years to adapt to the current needs. That's not true, because the fact is and they bring up the other things. One party, its simple purpose would be to uphold the laws in its original constitution to provide military defense against outside threats. Well, no, the fact is if we look at the ideas, we can actually see that the ideas that were brought forth by TED were actually completely wrong. That merely what we actually need is to follow it, and this would actually be something that would be not necessarily in a partisan way, but in something that would be for merely just the idea to aid people's mental health. And this is something that we can actually look toward and look in such a way that we would be helping out people's mental health in the long run. And it wouldn't be necessarily going in one direction or another. All we'd be doing is merely following the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, the actual documents that founded the nation. Now they set up these documents specifically and wanted them to be followed in a direct manner. Now, when people want to adjust the document, you actually make an amendment, and that's how you adjust the document. Now, if the document cannot pass in such a way that you do not have enough of a majority and enough of the states to validate it, then that amendment is not passed. And there's reasons why we do this. And this is the actual point. And we can actually see that regardless of party, because we can see that there's definitely neoconservatives that want all these defense contractors to remain in power, and that they're basically doing their bidding. And we can see that a lot of the money is going out, and the defense growth is just massive. If you look at the most recent one, it's just growing on a massive scale. And we can see that even though there's problems with veteran affairs, that all their solutions seem to be pump more money into it. That's not exactly the solution. The solution should be to give them the same health care that the congressional members have, and let them go out there and get private health care and shut down veterans affairs. And completely shut down the program, immediately eliminated, because it's single payer. And we know the problems of single payer around the world. It's rationed health care, and it makes people wait. And we should not be allowing our servicemen and women to wait. And by our foreign policy of basically going to war over nothing, and allowing these chicken hawks like John Bolton to control foreign policy of saying, send these people to die and get maimed, it's causing a longer wait time, because you're adding more people to this list. We should be trying to shorten the list by actually having a policy that's a lot more restrictive of what we're doing, shutting down the bases overseas, just worrying about just defense here at home. And there's benefits to that when it comes to the actual budget that helps a lot of people here at home, because we need to have a lot more thought of what's the actual best for making sure that people get the most out of life. And when we get a government, doesn't matter if we're talking federal, state, local, we want to make sure it's as small as possible, because there's other things to life than government. And this is the actual point. And we should actually realize this. And there's many other aspects to life out there. People should enjoy their lives, and it shouldn't be just overtaken by these issues. And we should not have them subsidizing everything. They shouldn't be subsidizing any medical care. They shouldn't be subsidizing any of it, because otherwise we can get to be very cheap. Now, there's other areas that I will talk about of why that should not be allowed, because of certain issues on the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. But those are other issues. But when it comes down to it, is people should basically have the right to dictate where they want to go in life, and it shouldn't be a government actually restricting you. You shouldn't be basically interacting with the government on a daily basis of everything you do. And that's where the problem is coming from. And it's raising a lot of people's stress in everything, and it causes a lot of strife between a lot of different people that doesn't need to exist. If you're fighting with someone over the ideas of government, you have lost your priorities, and you need to start reevaluating what's going on. because the fact is government isn't life. There's a lot more things that matter to life than just government. And you need to realize if you make government smaller, you don't have to have these problems. You need to essentially get government out of the way. Let your life actually be able to go beyond government. And that's the actual solution. And even though conservatives still, there's even a lot of conservatives out there who still want a big part of their lives as government, and they're still wrong. When it comes to foreign policy, they love their wars. There's a lot of conservatives out there who do that, and they're not even really acting in a conservative manner. They'll go attack people saying, "Oh, but if we abandon this area, then the terrorists win." That means they're not really conservative about the budget, now are they? Because they still want to spend a lot of money on military. They just do not want to spend any money domestically, and they're willing to cut money domestically to spend it overseas, which means they're still spending the same amount of money. They just don't want. It's just where they want to put the money at, and they're just as fiscally irresponsible as their liberal counterparts. Now I'm probably just going to end it right here with it. If you like this, like, subscribe, click the notification bell, make sure you share this all the way around social media. Make sure you check out my Patreon page. If you can't donate, make sure you share with someone else who can, and that's about it. And I will see you guys later. Bye, everyone.